complete pacification. It is even more pacified than the sixth level. In the previous level of pacification, one uses concentration to suppress afflictions such as examination and analysis, like temporarily pressing down grass with a stone. In the first dhyana, examination and analysis are still present. However, the pressed grass still stirs. It is not that afflictions and thoughts have entirely ceased. At this stage, as soon as examination or analysis arises, one immediately eliminates them. The first 4 levels of mental stability involve settling the mind on the object. However, the primary purpose of cultivating samatha is to transcend desires and unwholesome states. As concentration deepens, the 5th to 7th levels of mental stability become the process of subduing afflictions. Subduing afflictions does not mean eradicating them. Only when the mind is both tranquil and pure can one advance toward right concentration. At this stage, one no longer needs to use crude tools, very coarse or forceful antidotes. Previously, the antidotes were coarse, the staff was thick, and required intense effort. Now, one only needs to watch the elephant gently. By simply looking at it, it no longer runs about. The monkey has also surrendered. This indicates that coarse drowsiness and agitation have long disappeared. Subtle drowsiness and agitation are now under control, although they may still arise. Subtle agitation is almost gone, with only a small amount remaining. At this stage, there is no need for tools. Just maintain mindfulness without exerting too much mental effort. One-pointedness. At this stage, the mind has already settled and is no longer disturbed by internal or external negative factors. It can rest in equanimity and wholesomeness. One strives to focus the mind single-pointedly, aiming for natural, uninterrupted, and continuous abiding. The mind now abides naturally, without the need for maintenance. At this level and beyond, both the fire and the monkey have disappeared, and the elephant has become very white. This indicates that at this stage, one can remain in concentration for a long time, and that the mind is fully under control. When the mind reaches this level of stability, it becomes manageable. It can naturally remain focused without interruption, undisturbed by internal or external negative factors. Resting in equanimity. This level is a further progression from one-pointedness, more refined than the 8th level. The mind abides naturally, effortlessly, and continuously. At this stage, the mind truly abides in a natural and effortless way. In the previous levels, one still needs to apply some intentional effort. At the 8th level, although there is almost no need to apply effort, one still cannot fully use the mind as one wishes. When one cultivates to this stage, one has attained concentration. The methods of meditation vary, and the time needed to achieve it differs from person to person. Each individual's capacity for meditation varies greatly. However, regarding the complete journey from initially disciplining the mind to achieving right concentration, the sages have said that the skillful process of cultivating samatha does not go beyond the 9 levels of mental stability. It generally falls within these 9 stages. Therefore, to develop basic concentration, we should practice according to these methods. We must recognize our progress accurately to avoid giving rise to pride, which could harm both ourselves and others. The ultimate goal of cultivating concentration is to transform from ignorance into enlightenment. However, discussing enlightenment from the very beginning is impractical for most people, except for a few individuals with profound and sharp faculties. In the illustration, one sits in meditation and the elephant lies obediently beside him. At the 9th level, a rainbow extends from one's heart, symbolizing the states and practices achieved after resting in equanimity. The flying monk on the rainbow path represents physical peace, while the monk riding the elephant represents mental peace. One has attained the highest level of peace in both body and mind. Finally, one rides the white elephant, accompanied by fire and a sword, symbolizing the union of tranquility and insight. Unlike the fires representing the 4 types of mental engagement, this fire is the fire of wisdom. The sword represents the right view of selflessness, which can uproot the cycle of samsara. The 9 levels of mental stability are not entirely non-Buddhist practices. In the later stages, if guided by the right view, one can enter the union of tranquility and insight. As I said a few days ago, the view you hold determines the concentration you attain. Right view is crucial. The Sixth Patriarch said, "We don't discuss meditation or liberation," which emphasizes the importance of right view. With right view, meditation is not difficult. Practice in this way and concentration will naturally arise. However, without right view, even developing the deepest mental stability is of little use. Without the guidance of wisdom, even if one reaches the 9th level of mental stability, where the mind is fully obedient, it is merely a non-Buddhist concentration. It cannot lead to liberation and is not the union of tranquility and insight. After reaching a certain level of concentration, one naturally rests the mind in the right view one holds. For example, if you have the right view of selflessness, you can apply all these 9 methods. As you progress, the mind naturally stops wandering. Gradually, as your mind calms, you can activate mindfulness and rest the mind on selflessness. When self-grasping arises, use the right view of non-self to counteract it. Little by little, self-grasping diminishes. Both the 4th and 5th levels of mental stability involve this process of taming. Especially at the levels of taming and pacification, the distracting thoughts contain the 5 hindrances. Actually, the 5 hindrances also involve self-grasping, as self-grasping is an attachment, an affliction, and a wrong view. The 6 root afflictions include wrong view. As long as self-grasping is present, the mind is not tranquil. Hence, non-Buddhist concentrations that merely anchor the mind on an object are inadequate. The 9 levels of mental stability we learn are shared by both non-Buddhist and Buddhist paths. By practicing the 9 levels of mental stability with the right view of non-self, one can ultimately uproot the cycle of rebirth. As one progresses from the 6th level, which involves taming afflictions and especially distracting thoughts, to the 7th level, self-grasping gradually diminishes. The obstacles are not limited to subtle drowsiness and agitation. As long as you have an attachment, it will surge in the mind. Mere concentration practice alone cannot eliminate these obstacles. During sitting sessions, afflictions may not appear, but when facing external temptations and challenging circumstances, you should remain unaffected and respond calmly. This is the 5th level of mental stability. In other words, even at the 5th level, one needs to tame the mind by facing real-life situations. As stated in the text, one should respond calmly to the 5 desires, the 3 poisons, and sensual temptations. Simply sitting in meditation cannot bring about such progress. So, meditation is not limited to sitting sessions. The 5th level of taming requires taming the mind through real-life circumstances. Why do I mention this topic? Because our daily practice of the essentials for purifying the mind guides us in learning the power of antidotes. First, meditate during sitting sessions. Then, try to remain unaffected by situations in daily life. Gradually, deluded thoughts and greed will no longer arise. When encountering challenging circumstances, the moment a craving emerges, you will notice it. Reflecting on impurity, impermanence, and selflessness can all counteract the affliction of craving. This is taming the mind at the 5th and 6th levels. It is the practice we currently engage in. Some people are still at the 1st or 2nd level and haven't yet entered the proper state. Those at the 1st stage carry heavy defilements, greed, and anger. Nonetheless, they have begun studying the Dharma and are gradually learning to repent. When they see something beautiful, they want to look. When they hear pleasant sounds, they want to listen. When they face delicious food, they want to eat. Their minds are completely distracted without any stability. Ordinary beings are trapped in samsara precisely because of this distracted mind, unrestrained, like wild horses without reins or mad elephants, entirely drifting with karma. If this distracted mind is not tamed, it is like a wild beast, completely unruly, drifting with karma, and devoid of self-control. Look at ordinary beings in samsara. They are simply driven by their karma, entirely unable to control themselves.